Hello and welcome back to Miniature Addiction Club. Today I'm making a miniature Easter basket. Some of you may know by now that I have a bit of a problem when it comes to miniatures being hyper-realistic and authentic, and I was actually considering hand weaving a tiny basket and aiming for 100% accuracy, but I just didn't have time to learn an entirely new craft, so I decided to be kind to myself and make a simple and easy basket instead. So I cut down this metal lid that I had in my junk drawer and sanded the top smooth to get rid of any sharp bits and prevent future injury. Then I used my pliers and fingers to smush the metal into more of an oval shape. I decided to use a scrap of linen canvas for the basket as it already had a woven texture. I applied some tacky glue to the metal cap and added the fabric, making sure to leave enough room at the top to fold down later. And because settling for less than perfect is the theme of today's video, I went ahead and cut my fabric too short and had to add in an extra piece to the side, but we're not going to talk about that. Then I made some small cuts along the top edge of the fabric, added some glue and folded the fabric down over the metal rim of the cap. Then I did the same thing for the base of the basket. I trimmed this a little bit as well so it was less bulky underneath. Once that had dried, I added a little oval of fabric to the bottom to cover up any imperfections. I found this braided trim at a second-hand shop and I'm using some tacky glue to attach it to some wire to form the handle of the basket. Once the glue had dried, I could bend the wire to form the handle and trim it to the correct size. Then I glued it in place with more tacky glue. Hot glue would probably have been better for this, but I was too lazy to go and set it up and wait for the glue to melt. I also trimmed off all the extra fuzzy bits and glued some of the trim around the top of the basket. Then I went ahead and covered the basket in a wash of acrylic ink. I'm using a very pale pastel violet. This will help glue down any of the stray fluffy bits of the trim and give it more of a shabby chic whitewashed appearance. Then I spent a good half an hour rummaging through all of my embroidery threads and ribbons to find a selection of Easter colours. I love how all of these look together, but sadly I'm going to have to narrow it down as they won't all fit on my tiny basket. I ended up going with this two-toned embroidery thread along with the lilac one. I separated the threads to make it thinner and wrapped it around the handle of the basket. Then I did the same with the other colour, adding dots of glue here and there to hold the threads in place. Next I made a tiny bow out of some scrap ribbon I had and glued it to the side of the basket. Then I went through all of my paper stash to find something to make some straw with, and decided to go with the grass green paper as it complemented the basket nicely. Using a metal ruler and a craft knife, I cut tiny strips of paper which I then scrunched up and added to the basket. To make the chocolate Easter bunnies, I made a template out of paper to help determine the scale I needed. I rolled out a thin slab of brown polymer clay and cut around my template. Then, using my silicone shaping tool and dotting tool, I prodded and poked the poor little bunny into shape. I baked this in the oven following the package directions, then added some clay to the flat side and sculpted in the details. Then I refined the details, adding some eyes and a nose and smoothing out any lumps and bumps. Then I popped him back in the oven to bake. I knew I wanted to play around with having some of the bunnies wrapped in foil, so I made a mould of the final bunny. I used 2 parts silicone moulding putty from Temu to make the mould and mixed equal parts together. Once I had mixed both parts together thoroughly, I pressed the bunny into the clay. I'm casting one side at a time so I can easily demould them. I repeated this process for the other side of the bunny, and then I could fill each of the moulds with clay. I pressed the clay into the mould with my dotting tool and smoothed it out with my fingers. Then I could gently extract the bunny from the mould and repeat the process for the other side. I joined the 2 sides together and blended the edges a little, leaving a little bit of the seam visible to make it look like a real chocolate moulded bunny. I originally planned to wrap the bunny in gold leaf for the foil wrapper, but I couldn't find my gold leaf anywhere, so I decided to use what I had lying around, which happened to be some gold foil from a cheese wrapper. You could also repurpose the foil from an actual Easter egg instead, but I didn't think of that until just now. I attached my foil wrapper with some tacky glue and moulded it around the shape of the bunny with my fingers. Then I trimmed down some paper twine and tied a little bow around its neck. Then I used my ball stylus to smooth down the foil over all of the details in the clay, making them more visible. And there we have our first little chocolate Easter bunny. Then I made another one with the wrapper partially unwrapped and added a little gold bow. I gave each of the chocolate bunnies a coat of satin varnish to give them a tempered chocolate appearance. I also made some Easter eggs out of some pastel-coloured polymer clay and arranged these in the basket along with the chocolate bunny. I don't know about you, but my favourite thing about Easter isn't the copious amounts of chocolate, but actually these derpy looking little chicken babies. They're just so cute and literally have no purpose in life, much like boy chickens on a hen farm. Anyway, I just had to try and make a miniature version of these iconic Easter delights, and I struck gold at my local second-hand store when I came across this box of random Huzumawatsits for 50 cents. I pillaged the yellow fluff balls to whittle down into the shape of a chicken nugget. I saved all of the fluffy offcuts because you never know when they'll come in handy. Then I set about making a pair of tiny feet out of wire. I used my pliers to create an L shape, then I made a V shape with a shorter piece of wire to form the toes. Using a ceramic tile as my base, I attached the leg wire to the toe wire with super glue. And I think a round of applause is in order because this was the first time I managed not to super glue my fingers together. Once it was dry, I carefully sliced the wires off of the tile with my craft knife. Then, using my least favourite pair of scissors, I trimmed the toe wires to make the feet even smaller. I gave them a coat of orange acrylic paint and set them aside to dry. Next, I cut a tiny triangle out of orange paper for the beak. I added 2 dots of tacky glue and added some small nail art beads for the eyes. Then I added the tiny beak. Just look how freaking cute this is already. Then I trimmed off the extra leg wire and pushed them into place with a little glue. And there we have our adorable little derpy chicken baby. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you all have a happy Easter, take care, and I'll see you next time.